Africa. Chat Night Africa. We all over the world. Chat Night Africa. Chat Night Africa. Welcome to Chat Night, the only place that we give you good vibes. Chat Night Africa. Welcome to Chat Night. All over the world, we are shining the light. Chat Night Africa. Welcome to Chat Night.
Edition of Healthline on Chat Night Africa. My name is Divine Chamakong, and I'm anchoring this broadcast from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Bad luck. Is it written into our biology, or is it the price of living long enough? Nearly everyone has been touched by this terrible disease, personally or through someone they love. This week on Healthline, we go beyond fear and statistics to examine what really drives cancer and what that means for how we prevent it, detect it, and live with it. In other words, how knowledge and action can change outcomes and save lives. Thank you again for deciding to join this all-important broadcast. Professor Edmond Folefak is a leading researcher in the latest cancer treatments in the United States. As a scientist, he is at the forefront of how we understand, prevent, and fight the disease. Prof, thank you for once again finding time to come on Healthline on Chat Night Africa.
Thank you, Divine, and thank you for your our listeners. And wish we have a little brief interaction today, and maybe the audience can pick one or two things, especially our audience from in Africa.
Professor Edmond Folefak, when you talk about cancer, it sounds distant to some people. Now, tell me, is it true that our bodies create abnormal cells every day? And if that's happening, why don't most of us develop cancer?
Yes, it is absolutely true that our body, it's a factory that potentially could create cancer cells, could be cancer cells every day. Your body has about, over 30 trillion cells, most of which divide per day. And, if you just think about that sheer number, you think about that sheer number, then you'll realize that a lot of mistakes could be made during this whole entire process. For cell division to take place, it has to start from the DNA. The DNA is the genetic, code. The DNA needs to unfold, it needs to divide, it needs to copy itself, and then the cell needs to enter what we call a cell cycle, and then go through this entire process. So during this entire process, if you think about it as a factory, there are obviously mistakes that will be made, either from the replication of the DNA to the cell division. And as that process is made, it's there will be what we call mutations. Mutations is what we in science would, describe a lot of those mistakes that are made. As they are being made, if they are allowed to accumulate up to a certain level, then that cell could transform into a cancer cell. Now, the body has several different mechanisms that it tries to prevent this from taking place. So there is only during the day, as from the DNA, you have certain processes that prevent damaged DNA from actually being copied. We called it the DNA replication or DNA repair mechanism. And if that process fails to take place at a meaningful level, then cancer, it can lead to cancer cells. As your cells divide, the more the cells divide over time, the more likely some of these mutations can happen. And for that reason, the body has somewhat of a process that it has put in place, that the cell can only divide up to a certain fixed number of divisions, which we describe as the Hayflick limit, probably about 40 something to 50 times over its lifespan, and then it is programmed to die through a process called apoptosis. And if that process is also prevented, then that 40 cells could transform into a cancer cell. Once the DNA has finished dividing, it gets into what we call the cell cycle. First of all, accumulating all the material, then dividing, then segregating into two, and then growing to form two or more cells. This process has what we call checkpoint, um, and it also has processes in place to be able to make sure that to prevent cells that are faulty from further entering that cell cycle. If that cell cycle also gets faulty, then cancer can happen. And then throughout, of course, we are exposed to daily environmental factors such as radiations, such as inflammation, a lot of other things, chemicals that actually damage our cells. And all of these actually also should really be able to be taken out of the system. If they are not, they could also potentially become cancer cells. And this is the reason why, even despite the fact that our body are prone every daily to have, to become some cells in our body, I should say, a tiny fraction is prone daily to become cancer cells through all these different mechanisms, the DNA repair mechanism, your the cell checkpoint mechanism, your immune system, and so on and so forth. Then the program cell death, the committer of the cell to actually make sure that at a certain point it can no longer divide. All of these are the things that really make it impossible, that prevents most of us from developing and dying from cancer. The one last thing I would mention is, just from there, you can deduce that as we get older, the older we live, the more we are exposed to this what we will call carcinogens. And then also the older, we live, the more some of these cells that have been dividing get to a point where those some of these mistakes, they become the proclivity or the propensity to commit some of this, to go escape some of these mechanisms that check cancer happen. And this is why we see cancer occur mostly in older people.
Dr. Edmond Folefak, what are oxidative stress and inflammation? How is each connected to cancer?
So when we talk of oxidative stress, we are actually referring to a group of chemicals, such as free radicals, hydrogen, some from oxygen, from nitrogen, which damage they have the ability to damage proteins, fats, like the cellular membrane, and potentially damage tissues in our body. And because they have the propensity to do this, they then can potentially lead to the accumulation of things like mutations, and eventually translate to cancer cells. So like I said, the chief among them would be things like we have hydrogen peroxide, the nitric oxide, and so on and so forth. So we have the when this oxidative stress happen, the cause this the produce this free radicals and all these substances. Our body has its own mechanism, internal mechanism that it uses to actually clean these free radicals, mop them up. Something we would describe as detoxification. Now, when the body's ability to detoxify some of these free radicals is overwhelmed by the production of the free radicals, then it can typically can induce cell damage, and it can cause inflammation, typically chronic inflammation, which can it kind of like it becomes a self-fulfilling. More inflammation cause more free radicals. More free radical induce more inflammation, and this is why all these radicals caused from oxidative stress can be a very very dangerous thing to our body.
You are watching Healthline, and this is Chat Night Africa. My name is Divine Chamakon. My guest today is one of the leading researchers in cancer treatments in the United States, Dr. Edmond Folefak. The immune system is supposed to be the fleet of F-16s or B-52s in our bodies. Are there times that cancerous cells would evade the immune system?
Absolutely, yes. The your immune system, like you say, for people who are not familiar with familiar with the F-16 fleet, as you talk about here in the U.S., these are some of the best, fighter jets, that we have. And yes, our immune system is supposed to be it's actually not supposed to be, but it is our defense against anything foreign, ranging from infection to potentially cancerous cells to chemicals that don't actually don't belong to our body. So your immune system is as complex as anything that you can even imagine. And it is not until very recently that the power of the immune system has actually been beginning to be unleashed to fight cancer. And we think that one of the reasons why, among the different reasons why cancer occur, one chief one is the ability of the cancer cells to evade the immune system. And this it can it, you realizing that cancer is actually I describe it as an insurgency in the sense that these are your own body cells, and so being an insurgency, it knows the system like a nursery school rhyme. And so this is why sometimes it becomes very, very easy sometimes for cancer to evade the immune system.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, sometimes we hear that some people are diagnosed with some forms of aggressive cancers. What makes some cancers aggressive and some not so aggressive?
So the there are too many things that can make a cancer aggressive, and some, more indolent. Some we understand, some we don't. We start sometimes from at the level of the genetics, the genes. The genes is the instructional manual. And so some cancers just have some genetic mutations that allow them, that allow cancer to not only grow, but become quite aggressive. Our body has probably between anywhere from around 20,000 to about 21,000 genes. Some may put it even much more, like 23,000. Of those, probably about 200 drive cancer. And actually, of these 200 that we call, cancer-associated, genes, there are very few of them that we call driver, driver genes. Either like that, and these ones would actually be, they could actually suppress. They do this in two ways. One is by suppressing the genes that normally would prevent us from getting cancer, which we call the tumor suppressor genes. And the other one is by promoting the cancers, the genes that allow us to actually that would drive cancer, which we call oncogenes. So it's like you have a car, an accelerator, and the brake. So if you have a gene, the oncogenes will be like the accelerator, and then these tumor suppressor genes will be like the brakes. So if you have a car, and for some reason the brakes are faulty, the car won't work. If you put your gas on the gas and you just goes on the accelerator, the car would also not work as effectively as you want it, in the sense that it won't stop when you want it to stop. So some cancers just actually have these mutations that allow that, cause from the genes that, cause this either the accelerator genes, which we call oncogenes, or does actually suppress those genes that would actually help us limit cancer. Either way, they make those cancers a lot less more aggressive. That is one thing. The second thing is that sometimes it's what we call the epigenetic phenomenon. So maybe sometimes the cancer has already, it is not really the mutation, but what happens after on the gene, after the gene has actually in order to modify the kind of proteins that the gene would produce. And of course, you can also think about it the seed and soil hypothesis, the cancer gene being the seed, the soil being the body in which the cancer is growing. So if in this case, if you have bad soil, your body's immune system is really bad, then there is a possibility that your cancer could become a lot more aggressive, just because of your body's inability to be able to fight off the cancer. So these are some of the things that we know, or we've seen actually make more some cancers more aggressive. So by their nature, some of the cancers that we know, for instance, um, the lung cancer, especially what we call the non-small cell lung cancer, even the small cell, they are a lot more aggressive. We can see some form of breast cancer, like the triple negative, that are found mostly amongst blacks, unfortunately. Then sarcomas, and then some different kinds of cancers. So, but sometimes there are some cancers that are much more indolent. Prostate cancer is an example where you can find a majority of the prostate cancers are more indolent, more slow growing, but for some reason, some fractions of it acquire this ability to be able to really become quite aggressive and grow quite rapidly. So yes, we are still learning. Some, like I'm mentioning, we've known some, we just don't yet understand the biology. But as we increasingly study the biology, we are understanding how to be able to categorize and what is driving some of these cancers to become more aggressive and what is not. And through those studies, it is also allowing us the ability to be able to understand them better and treat them better.
Professor Folefak, are you concerned that so many people are being diagnosed with cancers in our community here in the United States, in Europe, and even in African countries?
So, listen, I think if you look at the data here in the US, I can talk about the US data. The problem in Africa sometimes is that we don't have too much great data. Hopefully we get to the point where we can be able to accumulate a lot of this data. In the US, you would say about 40% of men throughout their lifetime would develop one form of cancer or the other. And roughly about the same percentage in women, amongst women. But when you look at the actual number of people who die from cancer actually out here, is far less than the proportion of people who would actually develop these cancers. And the reason why, it's been from the early detection, which is screening. And this is why we talk to anybody. And we say, if you're over the age of 50, increasingly 45 now, probably, I would say, depending on your family history, if you don't have any family history by the age of 50, most everybody in the US, or if you're living in a place where you can get a colonoscopy, get one. The lung cancer, first, number one thing, don't smoke, because 90% of all lung cancers are caused by smoking. But if you do smoke, there is a screening protocol here in the US aimed at catching these cancers early, and that is using something we call the CT scan. For breast, mammograms yearly. For women, you start out yearly, starting at the age of about 40, but mostly depending on how well your on the biology of your breast, or the structure of your breast and your family history, they may decide to then do your mammogram, keep it yearly, or maybe make it every other year, as you. And then, prostate, do your PSA. Then you get your PSA done, and then again, based on your value, your doctor will then decide what next to do, and that we are here. I mean, if in doubt, you can always ask us. And so, yes, these cancers, part of the reason why we're diagnosing them a lot is because of the ability to be able to detect, like but there is also the fact that people are living longer, right? As we said, about, I would say a good 85% of all cancers are diagnosed in people over the age of 50, and probably about 60% of all of those cancers are diagnosed in people over the age of 65. Now, and so cancer is predominantly a disease of aging. I think the one big concern that we're having these days is that we're seeing a lot younger people. We're seeing a lot of younger people be diagnosed with certain kinds of cancers. About 14 of them, amongst which are breast, colon cancer. That we're diagnosing them earlier and earlier. And we think that in these cases, as in most, lifestyle has a big role to play here. And from lifestyle, we're talking about, sedentary lifestyle. We're talking about obesity. We're talking about what you consume. People who eat a lot of processed food. Of course, we've talked about smoking, alcohol use, and then, yeah, amongst our people, I think I would really urge people. I don't know the actual data, but it will be something that I will probably have one of my students look into this, because I think that but I suspect that the screening rates amongst Africans, especially those that happen to be here in the US or in Europe, where they could have, or Canada, and where they can have the ability to get diagnosed. I suspect that the um, the screening rates are a lot, maybe not as high as with the Caucasian population, and there may be several factors to explain this, but that's the data as we see it. And as I just was talking about it, and I was actually also making sure that people know exactly what to do. Cervical cancer is another one that women got to also make sure that the screen regularly for. And the reason why screening becomes quite important is that a lot of these cancers, when you catch them early, we can cure them. And by cure, I mean completely eliminate them. You know, um, but the problem is that when you catch them late, we're fighting an uphill battle. Yes, the medicines, probably at some point we'll talk about it. The medicines are becoming more and more effective at treating these cancers. But if given the choice, what would you like? What would you rather do? As we say, the best way to treat a disease is not to have it in the first place. But the second most best way of, next to that, having of treating that disease is to catch it early, especially with cancer. Early detection saves lives. This is what we always, like to let people understand and know.
And talking about early detection, I remember when I was going to do my colonoscopy,
Yeah.
I think that was 2 months ago. Some people said, Divine, have you not heard that some people went to do colonoscopy and died? Question:
Yeah.
How risky is that procedure?
It's not, in good hands. It's not risky at all. This is a very, very minimal risk procedure. And you can talk about that. You can share your experience since you've already had one done, right? I mean, when you get it done in good hands, you don't even know. I mean, they put you to sleep lightly. I think the real problem with colonoscopy is probably the prep, right? I mean, you have to take some prep, we
Liquids
call it
and
go
all those things.
lightly.
Yes.
So you take it and clean your intestine, and then it's the pooping during that period. And the reason why we do that is because if we have to go in with a camera and look, and the poop is on the way, you cannot be able to see the polyps, which are actually the very first early uh, uh, um, the cancer or no potentially cancerous lesions. We're looking for those polyps. A lot of those polyps turns out to be benign, but there are some that we can then be able to see that, if left there, would have grown to become cancerous, and then they will remove those. And if you're clean, they give you 10 years. If they see some of those polyps that look like they could be, maybe high risk of developing cancer, we kind of say, okay, you come back in 5 years or in 3 years or sometimes in 2 years, just depending on the nature of the particular polyp that they will see. So it's not, I think I encourage people to go get colonoscopy. If for any reason you still don't want to do it or still are reticent about doing it, then the next thing is there is Cologuard, right? There is the tiny, tiny little chemicals that we're now able to. Initially it was just detecting a blood on the stool and then having people prep and go for colonoscopy, but now we can detect little shreds, little pieces of chunks, tidbits of DNA from potentially cancerous cells that are shed in the colon through this test that we call Cologuard.
And Doc, here's what I'm going to tell all the people watching this show. I have been through colonoscopy, and when you climb onto the hospital bed, you don't even know when it's finished. I mean, when
Yeah.
they when they're done, you're asking them if they haven't started yet, because
Yeah.
you just don't even know what's going on. But let me tell you this: the inconvenience, and guys, women, listen to me. The inconvenience of preparing yourself for colonoscopy is far less than the pain of having colon cancer. Take this from me. Um, Doug, let me get back to the lifestyle. And I want to pinpoint two: smoking and drinking. How is smoking or drinking related to cancer? How would that cause cancer? I'd like you to address this squarely.
So it is, smoking. Cigarette has hundreds, hundreds of carcinogens in it, cigarette smoke. So when you smoke, those carcinogens, and remember what we talk about carcinogens, we mean things that could potentially damage, your, again, they may damage your DNA, they may damage the tissue, they may cause inflammation, and all of these are done to provoke, ultimately may lead to cancer. And we have actually, and because of those numbers of carcinogens that it has in it, in addition to the fact that when you smoke, it irritates the lung and the air passages and then cause chronic inflammation, which also drives cancer. I think these two, then the chemical damage, so it is the smoke irritation, the chemicals that are coming from that cigarette, which even without its carcinogenic property, it irritates, the airways. But of course, the chief amongst them is this number of hundreds and hundreds of carcinogens that are in smoke. I can tell you without mincing words that were it not for the fact that the tobacco industry is in bed with politicians and those people who regulate this stuff, then cigarettes would not even be in the market at all. And we have found that there is a level of, when I started out my career, actually I did some work on smoking, on smoking and cigarette, and we were developing some little looking at studying that when I was at the University of Vermont. And I think there was one of the things that I learned from the bench scientists, my colleagues from the bench science side who were doing this, was that there is actually a level of nicotine below which, if you put that level, if you reduce the nicotine level in the cigarette down to a certain level, nobody will smoke. The only reason that people keep smoking, because when they started, one, that nicotine gets you hooked up because it's an addiction. And then at that point, even when you are actually, even despite all the inconveniences that you feel, like the burning in the throat and all whatnot, and the irritation, sometimes the cough that comes with it, sometimes even the smell and things like that. If despite all of this, the fact that you've now already like been conditioned because you're now addicted, you're now an addict. Like, believe it or not, you're an addict, similar to somebody who is taking drugs. Like the people who, when I see people who see those people who take drugs and they call them junkies, and they say, "Oh, these people are addicted." I say, "You're just addicted to the cigarette, like that person is addicted to their whatever other garbage that they're taking." And so we know this because, again, 9 out of every 10 lung cancers in the US is caused by smoking. I didn't say associated, but caused by it. And in China and in some other areas of the world, we're beginning to find some people who never smoke but still get cigarette, which is a genetic, more the mutation thing that we talked about, rather than the cigarette smoking itself. In terms of alcohol
That's
really,
the big one.
the big one, I would say, when it comes to causing cancer, smoking is much bigger. 30% of all cancers are caused by smoking, are related to tobacco use. Now, what alcohol does most of the time is, damage the organs, and gets the damage. It damages some of the DNA, and also causes chronic inflammation. Like, for instance, some of the big organs in the body that alcohol actually affects, leading to cancer, would be things like the liver. And so people would go through a process of normal liver to what we call the fatty liver, to cirrhosis. Then it transforms then to a cancer. The pancreas is another one. It damages, and usually sometimes you see the same thing with going from, just the normal pancreas to chronic pancreatitis to cancer. But we're now beginning to see that alcohol also causes, associated with breast cancer and some other additional kinds of cancer. The problem, I would say, with, as the difference between alcohol and cigarette is that, yes, we know that there is a level of alcohol below which that impact it's minimal, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. In the past, the data used to say, oh, low levels of alcohol are protective, especially against heart diseases and blah, blah, blah. I think that was when they went back and look at this data. A lot of this data was questionable because it was actually sponsored by the wine industry, by, and people with interest. But if you can, the thing is, yes, we recognize the social value of alcohol. I don't drink, but I do recognize that social value of alcohol. But I just urge people to really be quite aware of, how much of it you drink, if you must drink, and just limit it if you must drink. And I think, by some estimates, a drink a day for a woman, probably, because women have lower tolerance of alcohol. When I mean tolerance, I don't mean the ability to drink and not get drunk, but I mean their body's ability to not be damaged. That level is lower, and probably this has to do with hormones, or the chemicals that break down alcohol in the body, compared to men. So I would say, and then there was this 40, information that was put, actually, about red wine. Actually, that was promoted by the French group. Now, that's not really, that was protective. It's not really true, based on more recent data. And people would say, yes, there is remembering that alcohol is actually made from grape. A lot of it, some of it is made from wines. Some wine is made from grape, and then there is a chemical called resveratrol in grapes, which is actually more acting like an antioxidant. Yes, but when you then have processed it, it's no longer the same actually chemical. It's not playing the same role in alcohol than it will in a normal when you get it from a normal grapefruit. So again, at the end of the day, we if you must drink, drink responsibly. That's really the mission. I don't even see how why smoking is even really an option. If you know, but that's for people to make up their decision.
Dr. Folefak, I have to say this segment of the broadcast is what not many people will be so thrilled about, especially smokers, especially drinkers. But here's what I have to say. If your face is dirty and you refuse to look at yourself in the mirror, the dirt in your face doesn't go away. So, guys, if you drink heavily, if you smoke, have the courage to watch this segment, but more importantly, watch and take action. Dr. Folefak, you talked at some point about bad immune system. As I described earlier, the immune system is supposed to be this fleet of B-52 fighters, F-16s and F-35s, meaning aggressive warplanes. What therefore would make those warplanes, your immune system, here referenced, be not so effective?
So some people are just born with bad luck, right? Like some people win the lottery of the womb, some people don't, right? So they're just born with a bad immune system. That's one. Um, some people, it is the lifestyle that has actually, impacted or maybe caused affected the immune system or decreased the immune system's ability to be efficacious against um, everything else, from fighting infections to fighting cancers to every to whatever else that the immune system may do to our body. And so, in terms of lifestyle, what we know now is if you have a sedentary lifestyle, it doesn't help your immune system, right? If you are obese, it doesn't help your immune system, right? If you are eating junk food, a lot of processed food, less vegetables, blah, blah, blah. We just talked about the category of oxidative stress, which, things like that. It doesn't help your immune system. If you don't sleep appropriately, if you don't sleep well, it doesn't help your immune system. So on the flip side, physical activity, regular physical activity, maintenance of ideal body weight, eating mostly, whole grain, whole plant-based, more vegetables, and the variety of vegetable also matters. There is emerging science now to tell us about the the fact that the more vegetables variety that you eat, the better for your immune system. And this goes up to a relation to something that I should mention here. It's called the microbiome. And this is a new one that, usually we used to just look at the poop and just say, oh, it's poop. And we did not know in science how much of a gold mine the poop was, and the microbiome is actually the sum total of all the microorganisms that live inside your body. And the greatest area, the great majority of them live within the GI system. And these microbiomes they're more numerous than our body cells. And many of them have tiny snippets of their own genetic material that they bring with them, from outside. And so they can actually impact our, and some of those microbiomes, we've studied them, we've seen some healthy patterns and some not healthy patterns. And some of these actually work by suppressing the not healthy pattern, work by suppressing or impacting the immune system. And we see this even in some patients who, when they take some antibiotics before they get immunotherapy, it may not be as effective. And some of the people for whom who've had the healthy patterns of the microbiome We've done fecal transplant, and then that's take the poop from those people who were healthy and put it in the people who had unhealthy poop, and they, lo and behold, their cancers responded to the immunotherapy. And so we now know, without a shadow of a doubt, that that immune system is impacted by the relationship between the body and this poop, which we call the microbiome. Now, it starts from
I like you to explain what poop means, because so
the
many
poop,
people.
the poop, Poop, your sheet. Yeah. If you wanted me to say your
Yes, please.
feces, I didn't want to use medical terminology, right? And then, and I was trying to use a language that maybe somebody who is actually eating, listening to your TV show would say, "We're not go puke," right? So, but that's what the I was going to say. The Very early on, we know children, when they use a lot of antibiotics early in childhood, this can affect that microbiome and shift from a healthy to a non-healthy microbiome. We now know that physical activity helps that microbiome. We know that people it helps you to give you a healthy microbiome. As we said again, eating a lot of varieties of vegetables, whole fruit, less processed food also helps it, and that also affects your immune system in its own way.
Professor
So
Folefa, yes.
we've
I
done
also,
that.
yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, of course, there are some treatments that people get. The one problem with some of the cancer, especially the older cancer treatments, was that it used to paradoxically also impact the immune system in its own way. But now we're becoming better.
We'll come to the treatments. But
Yeah.
before that happens, the question I have next is, are all cancers the same? The difference just being the parts of the body that they attack.
No. That used to be very early on. We were defining cancers by site. So you will hear lung cancer, which we still do now, right? You hear like colon cancer, which we still do now. But when we say cancers, there are probably now hundreds of different kinds of diseases. And now we now describe them more not just by geography or location, but by the mutations that they have. And so we can see somebody with a form of breast cancer, for instance, that is very receptive to the hormones. And that person is a complete different person, even if their cancer has traveled to somebody whose cancer does not depend on hormones. And even the people now whose cancer does not depend on hormone, like amongst women, which we call the triple negative, we now know it was not, we thought it was just one, but now there are six types, as and counting. So no, all cancers are not the same. And even beyond just describing them by geography, as if you hear somebody has lung cancer, it's a different thing from colon cancer. But now beginning, it's more the mutation, the pathways, what actually makes the cancer grow, and what pathways does it go up to grow, what mutations does it have, and what are the driver mutations, and what other additional factors, the immune environment in which the cancer milieu in which the cancer grows. These are the things that make cancers now completely different and makes them quite complex, to treat. This is why also you can hear two people have the same kind of cancer, the same stage, but then they go give somebody one treatment and then the cancer respond very well. And then you show the same treatment to another person's cancer and then the cancer is just smiling and laughing at you.
Before we get to treatments, I understand. Earlier in the show, you established the connection between cancer and age.
Mhm.
Professor Folefak, what may have happened with children, young children? It hurts me seeing young children with cancer, all kinds of cancers. What may have happened in their cases?
Yeah, again, there are things we continue to learn. Um, there are things we don't know. Like so I said, some people are just born by random bad luck. Some are there conditions that were exposed to in utero are there, but some are mutations that these children carried from their parents, and they transmitted this mutation. I mean, this mutations from parents down to pass. It was passed down from parent to offspring, and the parents did not know, and since they did not know, and then to pass on this mutation. These cancers occur very early on in the child's life. So these are some of the most of, but some again we just don't have a clue just yet. So there are mutations that would cause a child's bone marrow to fail, for instance, or maybe cause them to have acute leukemia. So some would cause a lot of people to just have some kinds of cancers would cause sarcomas. These are some of the things that we see as, like you said, yes, it just breaks your heart when you see a young child, having to battle with cancer. It's not a pleasant thing to think about.
In your earlier intervention, you said cancer is no longer the death sentence it used to be, because I had prepared a question: does cancer diagnosis signal the end of life? But then the question that leads me to your statement leads me to is, what has changed in the approach to treating cancer?
So I'll walk you a little bit down and see how we used to. I talked to you about cancer being an insurgency, right? Look, it's your normal body cells, doesn't really listen to anybody. Starts out like a juvenile delinquent power, of the worst type, obeys no rules, and then becomes almost like an insurgency that is trying to topple the whole system. In the past, what used to happen is we used to just carpet bomb because we did not know better, right? Like we just some of the early first kinds of chemotherapy were actually found accidentally during the World War One, yeah, I think, where they found out that this gas, nitrogen mustard, had impact on bone marrow and stuff like that, and it was from there that they started, getting all this kinds of what we would call cytotoxic chemotherapy. That was the beginning. They then found all these chemotherapies that would use, they will kill the cancer, but then they will also kill normal body cells. And that really would cause a lot of people grief. And it was effective for just quite some time. And then, and the cancer would figure out a way around these treatments. But as we walk along, then we got to the era of figuring out, uncovering the mutation, what drives the cancer, and then the era of targeted therapy was ushered in, where you find the appropriate the mutation. What is different between the cancer and the normal cell? How can you find medicines that would actually target just those mutations and leave the normal cells alone? It turns out that these medicines were not only better tolerated, but then because they kind of address the cancers with the particular mutation, people lived a lot longer with those mutations. And then the new kid in the block now is what we call immunotherapy, very recently. And you can think about the targeted therapies, to use that war analogy, is as the drones or maybe the guided missiles you're using to see, okay, we have a target. We need to just go hit. Instead of hitting that entire city, we know where, we kind of figure out where the bad guys are, and then we can actually go there. But even then, it's still not going to be as effective as immunotherapy now, which I can describe more, as a counterinsurgent, training and a counterinsurgent. Just like the insurgency knows the city, knows the place, knows the country. If you train the counterinsurgents, and it is the same people who know the place, they can fight the war better and take out the enemies better. And so the immunotherapy is really the new kid in the block. And we're seeing that some of this now have led to some of the drugs that we are now calling, people are describing it colloquially like having the Lazarus effect. And for those of you who know about the story of Lazarus in the Bible, you see somebody who is actually coming there almost dead. And the next morning, the next week or 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, 1 month, you see them, they're up and about. I have had quite a few of my own patients like that, who come in on a wheelchair, and I have one that actually cursed me out because when I was giving her the medicine, she kind of did not know. I had told her that this medicine, maybe it would be, this is what I think, if we have the luck, then you would benefit from. But at the same time, you may have side effects from it. And she had the side effects. But when she came that had the side effects, she was like, should have just let me die, this blah, 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 and so on and so forth. But then when we sat back and I said, no, we're going to manage the side effects, they went away. And then she's now 7 years out now. Yeah. No more treatments. Cancer has gone away. She's actually up and about doing her. I can count so many of those stories, in now that we have in the clinic. And so new other areas are being developed with what we call the chimeric, T cells, chimeric antigen therapy, which are other different, or cell therapy in general, which are other different forms of trying to manipulate the immune system. We're struggling with beginning, so it's almost more like a science fiction for when you see some of the things that are being done now. But I think the biggest things in cancer today is not just the treatment, it's the ability to be able to detect them early, and the ability to be able to find, take care of, distinguish whose cancer would grow and therefore should be dealt with, and whose cancer may just be there and be dormant, like in some cases of prostate cancers, and they should be left alone. And so, and of course, the cancer vaccines. I would be remiss if I don't mention the story of the HPV vaccine, especially for young women and, of course, young men. HPV is the virus that causes almost 100% of cervical cancer. And cervical cancer, the generation of young girls currently living should not see should not actually, they should think about cervical cancer the way that we are thinking about smallpox now, like a thing of the past. Because the HPV vaccine, if done and done at the appropriate time, actually eliminates that particular virus 100%, or 90 something percent, one would say, to just not be too optimistic. But so there are these things that we are seeing, the targeted therapies, the immunotherapies, the targeted screening, the cancer vaccines, and we're now also actually in the clinic. I mean, trying to figure out now how we can actually not have only the cancer preventative vaccine, but taking the proteins of the cancer themselves, manipulating it, and using it just similar to how we do vaccines, to then give it back to the patient to use it. Almost this is really the prototype of treatment, or maybe personalized treatment. And why not editing the genes, going into the genes and finding out some of those tumor suppressor cells and tumor oncogenes, and figuring out the genes on how to really treat them. Sickle cell, even though it's not typically a cancer, but now we can do gene therapy, where this is now something where we can eventually just cure this disease, and it's a reality now.
Professor Folefak,
Yeah.
I understand you now. I understand you are saying this is a scientific revolution.
Yeah, it's a big one, and my holy the thing that keeps me awake and worries me to death is that, you sit here in the US, you find out, you see all these modern therapies, all these things, but then in Africa, it's much more still a pipe dream, right? Because, some of these drugs are extremely expensive. And the question is, how do we make sure that everybody has access to them? And that is really going to be the number one ethical problem. And I've had quite a number of organizations, including our biggest organization, that we've talked about this, and I've had some interviews with them about, the ethical impermissibility of not being able to have access to these drugs in Africa.
You are watching Healthline. We'll be right back with Professor Folefak in just 2 minutes. Time for us to have an interlude, 2-minute interlude of music. But before that is done, just listen to this information. On this platform are 5 broadcast programs: Healthline, Next Generation Today, Echoes of Hope, Voices of Africa, Family Matters. We broadcast in two places on Facebook. We are on YouTube and on www.chatnightafrica.net in high resolution. If you're watching this on Facebook, I strongly recommend that you switch over to YouTube, hit the subscription button and the notification bell. Here is why. After 30 days, all live broadcasts on Facebook are eliminated. That's a Facebook policy. Ladies and gentlemen, watch this before I come right back with Professor Edmond Folefak. My name is Divine Chamukong. I'm anchoring this broadcast from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Stay tuned. I will be right back. Hold my hand, never let me down. That's what we come to do here on Chat Night Africa. Today, you are watching Healthline. Once again, my name is Divine Chamukong. Let's now put our hands together to welcome again on the platform Professor Edmond Folefak. Prof, my goodness, it's when I listen to you in the last segment, I was so filled with joy, because cancer, that C word, was so dreaded. If you went to your doctor for a medical checkup, and after that, after lab work, the doctor's nurse is asking you to call and talk to the doctor, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. Now, you talked about targeted therapy. I'm going to zero in on that. Targeted therapy, immunotherapy, chemotherapy. In what circumstance do you use each of those therapies to treat cancer?
So sometimes you can think about them almost like a Venn diagram, right? Like, Venn diagrams are connected, but then there are areas where that are separate. They are, when the patient, depending on the patients, we do something that we call genomics. Genomics means we are asking not just the histology as to say, hey, what kind of cancer is it, but we're asking the question, what drives the cancer? How does the cancer grow? And amongst that information of what drives the cancer, what we're looking is what pathways, what mutations, and some of these mutations, we've been able to develop drugs that targets, just interfere with that pathway. It could do that by blocking the receptor, by interrupting the the that the pathways and so on and so forth. And so if you have a drug that you're going to use that is particularly targeting a specific area on the cancer pathway to growth or survivor and things like that, then you call that targeted therapy. We have things like EGFR now in lung cancer, BRCA mutation for breast and some other cancers, um, and so on. So we there used to be sometimes some for people with breast cancer. There used to be something that we call the HER2 or HER2 for those of us, which is kind of a growth factor. It used to be a particular mutation that when you found, you knew this was really conferring a really bad prognosis. But now we have something to block that has actually gone from just it has afforded us an opportunity, which is now with this, we've now improved the lives of these people so significantly. And so that's for targeted therapy. And you can argue that sometimes when we use drugs to block the hormone receptors for in breast cancer or sometimes even in prostate cancer is a form of targeted therapy because there's a particular target that you are hitting. That's that word. That's where that word that term targeted therapy comes from. It's like you are particular hitting a particular target. That immunotherapy, by contrast, we are talking about using the immune system, enhancing the immune system ability to able to fight the cancer. Currently, we have the ones that are most commonly in use are the ones that we call checkpoint inhibitors. And we know again that the cancer kinds of like put brakes on the cancer on the immune system. And so you can think about the immune therapy as something that prevents that unleash that cancer's ability to put those brakes, that they take away those brakes from the that the cancer puts on the immune system and trains the immune system to go do its battles. Almost again, like this is why I talk about it as a counterinsurgent. You are trying training, you are looking, if you are looking at cancer as an insurgency, you are training a counterinsurgent. And so, because the immune system, like the cancer itself, are all part of the body, as opposed to other drugs that are not part of the body, you actually can see why the immune system would be so effective when it works. Needless to say, they don't work for everybody. And there are certain things that we can find to see in who it will work and who it will not work. Chemotherapy, as we know it, which I'd like to call cytotoxic chemotherapy, because chemotherapy in broad terms just means using chemicals to treat. And on that notion, I mean, if you describe it that way, even antibiotics will be chemotherapy. And then we'll say cancer chemotherapy, cytotoxic chemotherapy. These were the early forms that were like carpet bombing, to use the war analogy as I said it. Like these ones were indiscriminate. Well, the in not in we used to rely on the fact that the cancer grows more rapidly the than the normal cells. And these drugs were found to be effective because they hit rapidly growing cells. But there are also other rapidly growing cells in the body, the bone marrow, the GI tract, which is the reason why, most often than not, when you get these, people may have nausea, people may have low appetite, and the hair, people may have lose their hair and things like that. So therefore, we would use these treatments depending on the particular the features of the cancer. And sometimes we would use a combination of a targeted therapy and an immunotherapy, as I do in kidney cancer. Or sometimes we use a combination of a targeted therapy or of an immunotherapy and chemotherapy, as we do sometimes with lung cancer and some bladder cancers. So yeah, so that's in a nutshell, that's what we mean by these terminologies and how we broadly use it. But so it would be directed again determined by the features of the cancer, as based on the genomics and based on some of the things that we are the features that we see after analyzing the cancer further.
Professor Folefag, everyone who knew you'd be coming here today asked me to take this question to you unedited. Here's the question. When you read up on soursop, black grapes, dandelion roots, kiwi, moringa, turmeric, lemon peelings, you find that they contain potent active anti-cancer properties. Prof, why is it taking researchers so long to produce curative therapies when all these things are available? And earlier on in the program, you acknowledged that grapes have some properties that are anti-cancer. So what are you researchers doing? These things are in our grocery stores everywhere.
Right. So I think we should deconstruct things so people can get some clarity, right? So when you mean what you mean by finding a cure for cancer, as we talked about, first of all, cancer is not one disease. So that's number one. Number two is cancer diagnosed at different stages. Early cancers are curative. And this is a majority of the cancers that we diagnose today in the US or in developed countries or places where we have expertise and resources. So those are curative. The ones that are some of the more virulent, the ones, the more aggressive, advanced ones that I treat, like the ones that have metastasized or are no longer now being able to, are the things that we're talking about when we ask these questions. And the going back to all the turmeric, resveratrol, the grapes, what do you
Soursop
call
and
it,
also
soursop and all whatnot, and there are so many of them. There are so many. The issue is that just because a chemical actually could slow down the growth of a cancer in a petri dish doesn't necessarily mean that that chemical, when taken, actually would have an impact on the.
you are watching Voices, the voice of the great African, and the broadcast is a Healthline. We will be inviting, apparently, Professor Folefak fell off the line. We will have an interlude of music while waiting for him to come up on the platform to continue this very important broadcast. My name is Divine Chamukong. Let's have an interlude of music while waiting for Professor Folefak.
Lord Andy of Africa. Lord Andy of Africa.
And that's Lord Ande of Africa. Lord Ande, that's Lord Ande of Africa. Lord Ande of Africa is from the Taraba state of Nigeria. Professor Folefak was answering the all important all important question people ask me to take to him. You have soursop everywhere. You have dandelion root everywhere. You have kiwi. You have this. You have black grapes. You have. So why are all those things not brought into cancer research to not treat but cure cancer? Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Folefak is coming back on to answer, to respond to the question all of you ask me to bring to his feet. Here is the professor. All right. I don't seem to get your audio. I am not sure why. You are watching Voices of
How about now?
Yes, you are coming on 515. Yes,
Okay.
please take over the answer. Let me ask you the question again because this is very
I
important.
think I understood the question.
Yeah, but for somebody just coming in now, please kindly let me ask the question. Professor Folefak, when you read up on soursop, black grapes, dandelion roots, kiwi, moringa, turmeric, lemon peelings, you find that all these things contain potent active anti-cancer properties. Why are you researchers not diving into it, jumping onto it to produce not treatments but curative therapies? Your response, sir.
So I was trying to deconstruct the question, right? Like, so that we understand what we mean when we talk about when this question gets asked, and then to say that, and I had gotten to the point where I was mentioning that just because a chemical can actually slow down the growth of cancer or even kill it in a petri dish, it doesn't necessarily mean that that cancer that would have the same impact on the body. Because when you consume something like food or any medicine for that matter, you need first of all how what that but the to get this particular chemical absorbed by the body. It needs to be distributed and needs it to then get into the particular area where you want to target. And the concentration, matters. When these things are absorbed, they absorb and then they get metabolized. So a lot of them, I'm explaining this and taking time to explain this because so people understand. We've done a lot of studies have been done on this, either in terms of the prevention of cancer or in terms of actual cure. The first thing is that the dose that you would need to actually have an impact in many of these things is ginormous, that you cannot possibly even consume them. That's number one. Could you make it into a pill and then have people take it, or a concentration form and have people take it? When you've done that, it needs to, by the time it gets into the body and then gets broken down, get metabolized, and then gets transformed, it loses many of the things that you see in the petri dish. I give you an example. We start out with, if you look at all the chemicals that start out in the laboratory, where somebody say, hey, yes, I have this chemical that can cure cancer, or that has not cure, but that has the ability to either interfere or kill cancer cells. Take 5,000 of those from the laboratory. By the time you do them in the lab and do animal studies in the rat, in the dog, or whatever other mammals that you want to do, and then get to the level where I would take it up, which is in the phase 1 space, to start actually even looking at it in the clinical trial, I'll tell you that about 80-90% of that would have fallen off the radar because they won't even make it past that level. By the time when you go to now to the phase 1 level, and I'm just asking the question, what are the toxicities? How does it work to go to phase 2, then to go to phase 3? Then there is another graveyard of about 90-something percent of those. So the short and simple answer to this is that these are all things that people are only talk about them as some anecdotal things. You don't have any way of measuring. And you can imagine medicine actually at this point where somebody just come and say, "Oh, yeah, I took cassava peelings and it cured my, treated my disease, and so I should give you the same cassava peelings," without any formal controlled study to be able to prove that what you're actually talking about is actually right, and what quantity, at what, what are the potential side effects, and so on and so forth. You can imagine that, where that is the area in where we used to be in medicine, that was really, really the dark days of medicine, where it was more anecdotes rather than evidence based. So at this point, I would encourage everybody, all the things that you talked about were in plants, right? These
Yes.
are all plants. And I talked to you, the first thing I told you was what? Eat plants, eat green vegetables, but don't eat them in the sense that because you think they would cure your cancer. They will not. You can keep them because they would actually give you, like, some of them would contain both loads of vitamin E, vitamin C, things that we know are antioxidants. So they will provide you that. Some of them would maybe help decrease the inflammation in the body, the chronic inflammation that we talked about, which can help you, and provide some other additional benefit, but not to cure cancer,
Is
because there is
is
not what.
is that providing immune support?
Yeah. So if just like we talked about exercise, just like we talked about sleeping, right? Just we talked about, like, if you eating more your spinach and your whatever, your huckleberry, your what your
Blood
so it's
grapes
not,
and so on.
yeah. So there is nothing really. It's our sub for some people with prostate cancer would probably think it contains a little bit more phytoestrogen that actually suppress the testosterone, which drives the cancer, which drive prostate cancer. And so the other thing is, we have 200 and counting, 300 kinds of cancer. If you go, the medicine that we will use for colon cancer, we will not use it for lung cancer, for instance, or use it for sarcoma or stuff like that. And we should celebrate the fact that science has been able to offer us this. Don't tell me about your anecdote. Show me the evidence, right? Show me the evidence. You can imagine, I think you are entering a car and driving a car because there is evidence, right? That you can enter that car and then you will drive, and then that car will take you from. And nobody would allow a car until it goes through all the regulatory safety processes, because otherwise the people would really be I mean, they'll be remiss of their duty who do that. So in medicine, we really need to be very careful about what we are asking. Take, as I tell my people come and there are tons and tons of what we call dietary supplements. You just call, like, a tip of the iceberg. Those are just the ones that our people know, right? I sometimes see a bunch like this, at least like as long as this. And there are some people who are now in the specific area of medicine that they call, maybe um, the name is just complementary medicine, or whatever terminology they're using. But when somebody tells you about all of these things, ask them to show you the evidence, and there is none.
Your point taken. I am going to open the phone line 240-603-7367. 240-603-7367. We have 15 minutes to go to the end of this broadcast. Let me repeat the phone number: 240-603-7367. When you dial, please make sure that you suppress the volume of any listening device where you are, and just talk to me as you were on the phone in a phone conversation with me. Doctor, before we get the first phone call, okay, somebody just texted me. Let me see what the text is.
I can
Okay,
see a cancer. There was a Cliff Fozang posted a
asking,
question on chat, right?
yeah,
Can
can
cancer be prevented?
correct.
Yeah. I think again, some cancers can be prevented. Some some we just have to have early detection. And we did go, over things that we should do to prevent a lot of the cancers. Don't smoke. Cervical cancer in women would be one of those that I think we can.
I suspect he must have joined us late. So please, Clifford Sang, go back
Yeah,
to the start of this broadcast so doctor doesn't have to
yeah,
repeat the whole thing when we
yeah,
have. Yes,
yeah. So yeah,
yes, sir. Yeah, so I have a text here, just came
hmm
in. Doctor, I have heard that's the person texting who prefers to remain anonymous. That's why he
yeah,
asked me. Yeah, okay, then that's fine. That's fine. Doctor, we've heard so much about hydroxychloroquine taken in combination with ivermectin, and some people swear by its curative strength. What's your comment on this? Ivermectin combined with chloroquine, I think,
yeah.
or
So
mebendazole.
yeah, no, mebendazole is the same as the trade name for ivermectin.
Okay,
And that is these are things that that is anti-parasites, right? I mean, chloroquine also it's an anti-parasite, and we're often too familiar with what happened during COVID when people claim that chloroquine could cure COVID, and we know how this story ended. Um, the problem with mebendazole or ivermectin is that we have not. There has been just very similar to the issues that I was mentioning with other things. There was a lot of early studies that were done in the petri dish in the lab to say, okay, this particular drugs could interfere with the growth of cancer cells in the petri dish. But when they tried to take that into the lab, I mean, into the clinical trials, it failed. And it has not shown any benefit at all. I frequently see, unfortunately, I still see a lot of patients come in because some unscrupulous people are prescribing this medicine, claiming that it cures cancer. And the sad thing is that they just prescribe it for everything. There's just not a magic pill, for all sorts of cancers. And ivermectin doesn't work for cancer. Take it from me. And there have been studies that actually the most recent study that they were struggling to do is a phase 2 study. That is, you've actually looked at the toxicity. The toxicity in the phase 1 stuff, we don't really mind too much because it's something that we already know has been used for humans. The two scientists who actually, discovered ivermectin for what it did for river blindness, for filariasis, and all this other stuff, they won the Nobel Prize in 2015 in medicine. But when you try to take it to study it in cancer, it doesn't work, and it does cause a lot of toxicities. So please, there are don't be as they say, living by the banks of the river. So the proverb goes, "I'm washing your hands with spittle." So these things don't work.
thank
At
you.
least, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the clarifications. The next question I have while we wait for phone calls to come, we'll be closing this broadcast in 10 minutes. Are there foods or are there some treatments that you can take for those doing chemo? And because I ask this question because we know how terrible the effects of chemotherapy can be. So when you administer chemo, are there certain things that you give the patient to deaden the effects of chemo? Or can
The-
there be some foods they can eat to minimize its impact on the patient?
so the first time I see every patient in the clinic, after we've gone through that process of making sure that we discuss, we kind of like get to know ourselves, discuss about the attack plan, and making sure that the patient understands that we are there for them, and going through all of that, and then describing the treatment. The next thing that I always talk about is lifestyle. And this lifestyle includes food and, of course, exercise, we've talked about. And the same things that we talked about, like the whole plant-based food, if you can tolerate it, that is the better food for you. If you have to eat animal protein, which we really encourage sometimes because it needs to help you build muscles and um,
Okay, Professor Folefak again fell off the line. We'll come back to that question. Time for me to go back to the video, the music video that we played while waiting for him to resurface. You are watching Healthline on Chat Night Africa. Okay, Prof is coming right back. I'd like him to repeat the answer to the question that I asked him. Here is Professor Folefak.
is it a conspiracy or what is going on? Like,
I don't believe in conspiracy theories. Anyway, please retake
but
that
I
answer.
guess the question and the answer I was giving you is that yes, there are. If you we like people, sometimes on a good note, if you can eat the same healthy foods that we talked about, whole plant based, food, but we like sometimes. I mean, we would also recommend during treatment for people to eat certain things that are energy and protein rich. Maybe sometimes there are some people who may not, who may have lack the ability to be able to eat. The appetite is not there, so we may ask them to take boost. Things like Ensure and protein boost concentrate, and I even talk to the families. If you can blend any kinds of, there is nothing magical about boost or Ensure. Just get your own stuff, fruits, all kinds of things that you know are healthy, and blend it. Yes, people, when you want to eat flesh, chicken, I mean, fish is better, and chicken. Limiting red meat. We know red meat tends to be a little bit more you know, has replete with a little bit more unhealthy kinds of protein that the body is not able to process as much as, say, the fish and white meat. So yes, and for people who are actually on actual cytotoxic chemotherapy, there is a time when you give the treatment by second week, blood counts are a lot lower, and then they will bounce back up. During this period, we're always advising don't eat raw, um, vegetables like salad and stuff like that. If you can avoid it, if you have to, make sure you clean it so well, and then probably get some vinegar in it. And the reason there is simple, just because when you cook, you kill bacteria. And so if your immune system is going to be suppressed, your ability to fight infection is going to be suppressed already. We don't want you taking things that could, a bacteria that could sneak in, and sometimes something that your body would necessarily normally would have been able to handle it, but because your immune system is a little bit not up to speed, then you may come down with some kind of infection. So
So,
that's, yeah,
so when your immune system is suppressed because of the chemo, some
yeah.
types of chemo, what do you doctors then do to bring it back up? Because the patient needs the immune system to fight off
So
diseases and so on.
yeah. And then we talk again about, as we said, the immune system. It's kind of like a broad spectrum. In this case, when we mean the immune system, in this case, most doctors will be referring to the cancer fighting white blood cells.
Correct.
Those ones, what we would say is there is a shot, there is an injection that we can give patients, to boost that. We would tell people, we know that as a clockwork, we know exactly when the effect of the immune system of the chemotherapy would fall off, and then the white blood cells will start coming back up. So we can tell people just to make sure that you don't um, get to crowds. If you must go there, you wear masks, just making sure that you don't pick up infections, avoid shaking hands and things like that, and just being more paying more particular attention with hygiene and things like that. But again, there is an injection that we can use, which is called growth factors, which we normally give, that can actually help boost that. Immune
My
system.
last question on the show today. You talked about foods that are good to eat. Are foods that have sugar and carbs things to be avoided by a cancer patient or a patient
By
undergoing
everybody,
treatment?
by everybody, if you can't, right? Processed food is probably one of the things that is causing us the most some of the most health challenges these days. Um,
You have
and we
some. You have.
begin
Do
to
you, before you go? Do you have some examples of high processed foods? Just throw
yes,
them out
just
without mentioning the brands and names and
no,
so.
no, we don't. We're not. You don't have to mention brands or whatever. Just think
Okay.
about it. When the things in the food that the fiber, when you do ultra processed food, even your cassava, even when you take cocoyams that you take them and pound them, right? This is not the same cocoyams like you've made them into flour. These foods are not. This one is processed, one is not. Almost everything that you see in the shop these days that you buy, like in the form of refined carbohydrate and things like this, these are all, and some of them are ultra processed. So we don't need to mention brand names, but I just tell people, I mean, brand foods and stuff like that. But I tell people, just try when you go to the shop, the way, if your shop is set up like most shops in America, the good things are almost always on the outside. Go to the places where the you're going to buy the whole things. If you want to buy plantains, buy the whole plantain and go you cook it. If you want to buy cocoyams, if you want to eat cocoyams, try and buy the whole cocoyam. Don't get the ones that they've taken out all the fiber and everything else, and then just left you with and of course most of the what do you call the fast food. Thankfully, I hope most of our people don't eat that as much as a staple food, because again, the one bad thing about them is not only do they induce inflammation, but these are also sugars, like loaded with a lot of sugars. And we know that these are not healthy foods. And we're beginning to see, and relating some of especially colon cancer that is happening in younger ages. A lot of it is being associated for people who study this, to a lot of this ultra processed food. And we talked about the microbiome, that it gets disrupted, and that is part of the reason, part of the how it causes this cancer at a younger age than it would otherwise have been.
Doc, when I talked about foods to avoid during treatment, I read a lot about, well, some people talk a lot about avoiding um, foods that have sugar that they feed cancer, that these foods feed cancer instead of, I don't know whether these are just
No,
imaginations or actual science that they're talking about.
no, there is actual science in that. There is actual science in that the cancer metabolism is different from the normal cell metabolism. And the guy who came up with this, who studied this and got this drug, the Warburg, as we call it, the Warburg effect. So, but even the ultra processed refined carbohydrate, when we talk sugar, we're not talking just the cubes of sugar or the sugar grains. When you eat those ultra processed carbohydrates, they are also being transformed directly into sugar, as opposed to the complex kinds of carbohydrate. And this is part of the reason why they are not really that healthy. So you got to think about that. So yes, it is not.
Pineapples,
No, the
bananas, and so
fruits,
on. Yeah.
those are different kinds of sugar. Those
Okay.
are fructose, as opposed to glucose, which is the things that when you come down to different to the simple sugars is, you have fructose that is in fruits, then galactose, and then glucose. When we're talking about what we're talking about here, the pineapples, the apples, all those other fruits, sugar. I mean, the sugar in them is a natural form of sugar, which is not a bad, sugar, and it's a different kind of sugar from the one that we're talking about with yeah.
We have to go now, but here's the last question actually from a viewer, Clifford Sang. Doctor, is cancer a sickness for the rich, or it's just underdiagnosed in poor people? I'm reading the way he's posted the question.
Actually, it's unfortunately it affects part of the reason why it may affect poor people even more is that in some of the places where they live, like the places with poor environmental sanitation, poor air pollution, places where you may imagine that if they go out to dump waste and things like that, it would probably be more in the areas where poor people may live. Um, the um, the bad air quality would only be mostly predominantly more in the area where poor people would live. Yes, the poor people, they just get underdiagnosed, I think, if you are looking at it from that, if you're seeing it, but I mean, here in the US, I tend to see cancer even much more amongst the poorer community, and their cancers are actually much higher. Much more that there is something that we'll call whether it's what we call the zip code or the genetic code, we don't really know, but there is more of a zip code phenomenon in terms of the number of carcinogen. The more poor people would smoke, more poor people may drink, alcohol in excess. Poor people may have, things like a less healthy lifestyle. So cancer is not a cancer. It's not a disease of the rich people. It's a disease that affects everybody. It just happens that it may be a little bit more aggressive in the poor people because it will go undiagnosed for a long time. They're likely going to be exposed to more environmental factors that will cause it, and their lifestyle may be a little bit much more less desirable and prone to making cancer grow.
Professor Folefak, your last word.
Last word, cancer is here. Um, it's a disease that we can prevent, and we did talk about those ones that we can prevent. If you smoke, stop smoking. If you drink excessively, consider limiting. If you don't sleep well, consider sleeping. Making If you don't exercise, consider getting exercise regularly. If you eat junk, consider quitting that, and if you can, and eating healthy. And if you're obese, excess body weight, please make it an effort to try and make sure that you try and cut down your weight. And for young women, for women, for parents with young girls and young boys, make sure they get vaccinated against the HPV vaccine. And then, if you do all of these things, also make sure you screen yourself. And if you still screen yourself at 50, get your colonoscopy. At 40, if you're a woman, get your mammogram. At 45, if you're a man, especially a black man, start getting your PSA checked. And if you do this, and if you happen, unfortunately, to be diagnosed with cancer, as we just said, about 40% of the people would at one point or the other be diagnosed with cancer. Realize that early detection saves life. And if you get diagnosed with cancer, it's not the end. The treatments that we have nowadays and the treatments that are in the horizon are just so make me so filled with optimism. But those treatments are as good, they're only as good as you get them. And so if you get them, you need to be able to find the right person who can actually be able to help you navigate the system. And we go from there.
Wow. Okay. Somebody's asking a question. What is I think it meant PSA.
No, it's PSA, prostate specific antigen. Like this is something that it's produced by the prostate of most men. And when men get older, they produce a PSA, but when it's high, it can connote that that person may have cancer, even though we may also see it with people with an enlarged prostate. But once it's high, then the doctors can then start, doing further testing to differentiate whether the PSA is high as a result of an enlarged prostate or prostate cancer. If they find prostate cancer, then they will treat it.
Mr. Clifford Sang, take note, I had discussed this in greater depths with the doctor. So I'll send you that broadcast. It's on our YouTube broadcast channel. Doctor could go on and on PSA and so on. We just don't have the time for it. But again, he talked very elaborately on PSA in the previous editions of the broadcast when he was our guest to talk on cancer. So if you really want it, I'll send that broadcast to you. Professor Folefak, we could never, ever thank you enough. When I said you were a leading researcher, well, you've just proven it. You have unpacked a lot. This is one of my best broadcasts I've anchored on this on this platform. Again, because of the depth of knowledge that you have poured on the platform today. Thank you so much, sir. Yes, Cliff, I will be sending that broadcast to you. I don't know. Listen, if a man wouldn't watch that program, I don't know if the man believes he doesn't have prostate. So, so I will send that show to you. Doc, thank you again, sir.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you.
Nice weekend.
Thank you, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, that's how we come to the end of this show. What we have lined up will sweep you off your feet. What is coming in the next couple of weeks. I want to thank all of the people who have been contributing for the upkeep of this broadcast platform. By the way, if you've not seen yet our upgraded broadcast website, you should go see what's happening there. We are taking Chat Night Africa to a whole different level. www.chatnightafrica.net. If you are an Android phone user, just go to the Play Store and search Chat Night Africa to download the broadcast app. I want to thank my lieutenant, my right-hand man on this platform. That's Mr. Ze Roja, who is up awake in Nigeria now to make sure this show is airing concurrently on all the platforms we are present. I want to also thank my director of transmission, Mr. Mumbalingwa. Merci à tout le monde. I will see you next week for yet another powerful broadcast. Bye for now. I'll see you again.
Jungle Mix.
Yeah. It's time to say bye-bye on Chat Night Africa. It's time to say bye-bye on Chat Night Africa. You know it's been a pleasure with you, my friend. I can't wait to be here again, to go all over and all over again. Gonna be there until the end. Bye-bye on Chat Night Africa. It's time to say bye-bye on Chat Night Africa. Oh, yeah. Ooh. We hope you had a great time watching Chat Night Africa.